This is my video on the urinary system.
We're going to be talking about the urinary system and the bodily processes it affects. The function of the urinary system is to filter blood. From this filtered blood, it will eliminate the nitrogenous waste, maintaining ion concentration in our bodily fluids. Let us take a closer look at this process. The key organ in the system is the kidney. Our body has two of them. It has two sections, the renal cortex and the renal medulla. Kidneys cleanse the blood, and the waste byproduct is our urine. This blood enters the kidney through the renal artery. The artery then divides into capillaries that surround each nephron. The nephron is the functional unit of the kidney. After the blood is cleaned out, it enters the veins to be brought back to the bloodstream. So how is the waste product urine formed? Nephrons consist of a filter, a tubule, and a collecting duct. As blood enters the filter at high pressure, water and dissolved nutrients diffuse out of a cluster of capillaries known as the glomerulus. Pores in the filter allow water, urea, glucose, amino acids, and salts to pass. Larger particles such as blood cells and platelets are left in the bloodstream. This is the first step in urine formation, known as filtration. The second step is called reabsorption. The filtrate enters the renal tubules, which are divided into three: the proximal tubule, the loop of Henle, and the distal tubule. Each of them have different permeabilities and absorb different particles. The proximal tubule is a convoluted tubule lined with simple cuboidal epithelia that have microvilli and pumps that absorb ions and other nutrients from the filtrate. The remaining filtrate enters the loop of Henle, where it reabsorbs water. Water is reabsorbed as the filtrate moves from renal cortex to the renal medulla. As the filtrate dips in a sense again, salt is released into the medulla. When another filtrate passes, the salt concentration of the medulla is higher than that of the loop of Henle, and due to osmosis, water diffuses from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration, so water is absorbed into the bloodstream. The filtrate then enters the distal tubule to reabsorb even more nutrients, and then it enters the collecting duct as urine. The third step is secretion. This is when toxic substances, surplus ions, and others are absorbed from the blood back into the nephron to be excreted as urine. The materials found in urine are water, urea, and several types of ions. pH is determined by the amount of hydrogen ions. An increase in hydrogen ions means more acidity and a lower pH. A decrease in hydrogen ions means more alkalinity and a higher pH. The source of hydrogen ions in our body is from this equation. Carbon dioxide is released from our cells constantly as a waste product of respiration. This CO2 reacts with water to form carbonic acid. Carbonic acid is broken down into hydrogen ions and bicarbonate. Carbonic acid and bicarbonate are the key components of the first body pH regulating process, the buffer system. A buffer system is an aqueous substance that resists change in pH, maintaining the normal blood pH at 7.35 to 7.45. How this works is that whenever there is an increase of substance in one side of an equation, the equation shifts to the opposite side to balance their amounts in the body. The carbonic acid and bicarbonate buffer system is just one of the many different buffer systems in our body. The second process is respiratory regulation. The amount of CO2 exhaled by our lungs depends on acidity. Chemoreceptors sense a decrease in pH caused by an increase of CO2 in blood. Our brain will interpret the stimulus and tell us to breathe faster, inhaling more oxygen and releasing more CO2, making our blood pH go back to the normal range. The third process is renal regulation. As we have discussed, the kidneys reabsorb most of the nutrients and secrete urine that consists of some surplus ions. One of these ions are hydrogen ions. The kidney is able to control the amount of H ions it secretes and the amount of bicarbonate it reabsorbs depending on the pH of the blood. Reabsorption of bicarbonate and secretion of ions increase with higher blood acidity and decrease with higher blood alkalinity. But what happens when our acid-base regulating processes are not functioning? Acidosis occurs when blood pH is less than the normal range. It can be caused when there is a buildup of CO2 in the lungs due to depressed breathing, as in respiratory acidosis, and overproduction of CO2 that enters the blood, or excessive loss of bicarbonate, as in metabolic acidosis. If our body fails in ridding excess acids, it can lead to serious medical problems such as organ failure and even death. Alkalosis occurs when the blood pH is higher than the normal range. This happens when there is not enough CO2 in the blood due to rapid breathing or inhalation of oxygen, as in respiratory alkalosis, and overproduction of bicarbonate and loss of acid in blood, as in metabolic. Alkalosis can cause nausea, tremors, and vomiting. That concludes our lesson on the urinary system. Thank you for listening.